You might have seen James Hoffman's video where he breaks down the ultimate French press technique. And in that video, he promises a sludge and silt free, delicious cup of coffee using a French press.
We're looking for a really delicious cup of coffee with none of the silty, sludgy stuff at the bottom.
And in this video, I'm going to be following the techniques and the steps that he outlined in the video. If you haven't seen it, I'll link it down below, but I'll be following them to the T to see if it does live up to that promise of giving us a delicious and completely silt and sludge free cup of coffee. But before we get into it, if you're new here, I'm Joe with JoePicksJoe, and on this channel I talk about making and drinking of coffee, where I release videos every week. If that sounds interesting to you, scroll down, hit the subscribe, and if you find this helpful, hit the like button as well. It'd go a long way to helping me make more content like this. All right, let's get into it. So this technique that I watched him do, it's a very short video, but it has a lot of likes, a lot of views. So I'm assuming it is great. It's just the technique that he uses is a little bit different than what I'm used to and the way I've been taught, which I think is sort of like the average everyday way. Like I've made it lots of times in front of people and, you know, taught some other people, but I'm really excited to try this, to try to improve the process. So where I notice some differences in sort of like the standard way versus James Hoffman's ultimate way, I'll point those out as we go through the lesson. So let's get into the actual steps. So in his video, he said step number 1 is to not be in a rush. So how do I not be in a rush? Let me take a deep breath. Okay, I'm not in a rush. Okay, step 1 done, that was easy. All right, step 2 is acquire excellent coffee, and that I have done. Recently, I did a video talking about the best coffee in the world, or what is a contender for the best coffee in the world, and that is JBM, or Jamaica Blue Mountain Coffee. And this is the exact same coffee that I reviewed. I'll link it down below. And this is Jamaican Blue Mountain Coffee, 100% from Green Coffee Traders. So in terms of excellent coffee, done. In step 3, he says, pick your recipe. So recipe, you're like, what do you mean? Like, do I need a recipe book? Do I have to look online for a recipe? No. What it is talking about essentially is the ratio of coffee to water. And what he recommends for this is about 60 to 70 grams of coffee to about a liter of water. So in this case, this doesn't hold a liter of water. But in his example, he used about 30 grams of ground coffee to 500 grams of water. So that's the recipe that we're going to be following. In step 4, he says to get a digital scale. So this is an absolute must if you're at all into coffee. So he talks about, which I completely agree with, and I've talked about, I believe on this channel as well, is that measuring the coffee to know to be consistent in the future. So let's say we use 30 grams of coffee and 500 grams of water. We can't just eyeball that. We have to measure it with a kitchen scale. And this is, I've had this one for a really long time, but they're like 20 or 30 bucks. It's I highly recommend one. But you want to be consistent in terms of, okay, is this a good cup of coffee? Okay, I'm going to measure each and every time to try to replicate that good cup of coffee. On the other hand, was that a bad cup of coffee? You make sure you don't do that in the future. So step 4 is done having that digital scale. And step 5 is having fresh, soft, filtered water. Now, it's mostly beer in the fridge. So this step I'm not going to be able to do in terms of, like, we have the tap water. This is high quality water. We don't have hard water in this area, so no need for a water softener. But we have quality water here, so I'm going to be using that. So hopefully skipping that is not going to make too big of a change to the results. Okay, now that we've done all the 5 steps that are recommended to prepare to make this ultimate cup of French press coffee, now we're going to move on to the technique. So the technique is, like I mentioned before, 30 grams of coffee to 500 grams of water. So I'm going to take my coffee beans and grind them to about a medium coarse-ish grind. So he mentioned more towards the medium versus coarse. I've always been taught, and I've always used, a coarse grind, because one of the issues when you have a medium grind is that you could get over extraction and really a bitter cup of coffee. But you know what? He knows more than I do, so I'm not going to second guess it. I'm going to follow this to the T. I'm going to take 30 grams of this whole bean coffee, which is ideal in terms of quality coffee is freshly ground coffee. So I'm going to take 30 grams of this and coarse it to a medium, or ground it to a medium coarse grind. All right, so this is what it looks like, and tried my best. I don't have a proper grinder. This is more for spices, so I'm really just eyeballing it. There's some grounds in there that look a little bit coarser and some that look a little bit more medium, so I'm happy with that blend. Okay, so we got our 30 grams of medium to coarse ground coffee in there. Now I'm going to put in 500 grams of water. Now you might be wondering what temperature of water to use, and he didn't mention it in the video, but from prior knowledge I know it's best to be around 200 degrees. So yeah, 203, close enough. And zero the scale. Let's put 500 grams in. All right, and this is the point where he says now you have to exercise some patience. Now he recommends letting it sit for 4 minutes. And this is where another step where it differs as well. What I've been taught to use is put the plunger down just enough that all the coffee grounds are immersed in the water. So this is a little bit different than the standard technique that I've been using. Yeah, let's follow it to the T and let's wait 4 minutes. Okay, totally off topic here, but this lid has been wobbling for like 2 minutes so far. And now it's just finishing wobbling. That is one wobbly lid. Damn. Yeah, sorry, that was completely random. Okay, it's been 4 minutes now, and what he recommends next is taking 2 tablespoons, using one to sort of stir in that crust. Because what you want for the next step is you want all that sediment, you want all of that, to float down to the bottom. Already smells good. Okay, so what he recommends now is after stirring it with 1 tablespoon, use 2 tablespoons to sort of remove some of those floaty bits at the top and just throw them down the sink. And this is what it looks like here. So there seems to be a lot of floaty bits. Like it seems to be most of the coffee is, okay, maybe not so much. Okay, I'm gonna get rid of it just seems to be a lot more than what I kind of anticipated. All right, so I feel like I've taken out a little bit more than what was probably in his video. It was kind of unclear in his video, but it seems like I took out a little bit more than I maybe should have. That was sitting at the top, but you know, I had the scale zeroed, then I took it out. So I took about 18 grams worth of ground coffee and water combined. So probably a little bit less than the actual grounds that are still left in there. But regardless, I'm going to just trudge on and see how it turns out. I think it's going to turn out fine still. But yeah, now he recommends is really using your patience and doing nothing for between 5 to 7 minutes. And his recommended ideas are to read the newspaper or make breakfast. So I don't have any newspapers anymore. I've already ate breakfast. So yeah, I'm just going to sit here for 5 to 7 minutes. Okay, so it's been 7 minutes, and one of the reasons for waiting for so long is to wait for all those floaty bits and that sediment to drop all the way to the bottom to make a nice bed at the bottom. And it pretty much has done this. And it's really hard to record on video, to capture on video. And this is a darker drink as well, so it makes it even more difficult. But yeah, I would say a majority of the sediment has fallen to the bottom and created a nice bed. So far so good. I'm feeling good about this. Okay, now time to actually pour it. And yeah, I could see what he's talking about in terms of like using a lot of patience, because we had 4 minutes and then 7 minutes. So we've had like 11 minutes of steeping. This is not including, you know, the grinding and all that sort of stuff. So it's probably been like 15 minutes of real time of actually making this. So yeah, it's going to require some patience. All right, so this is where another way that it differs from what I'm used to And he says use the plunger with obviously the mesh filter. Just put it in the water just enough so that those sediment and those floaty bits aren't going to make its way into your actual cup. So what I'm most used to is pressing this down like softly all the way to the bottom. But what he recommends is not doing that, not to disturb that bed at the bottom. So and then he said very carefully pour it into the glass. So here we go. Yeah, and this turned out really, really well. It's a little bit hard to see on camera here, but just take my word for it. There are 0 floaty bits in there and 0 silt at the bottom as well, which is great. Yeah, that's a quality cup there. All right, last thing to do is to try it out. Yeah, that's delicious. That is a great cup of coffee. And one of the huge benefits to waiting that long is that it's actually like a drinkable temperature versus like using something like an AeroPress. Yeah, it's quicker and it's easier to clean up, but you know the water is so hot, and they recommend using around 200 degrees water in terms of temperature. But you brew it and then you still have to wait for it to cool down. With this, it produces a fantastic cup of coffee. Completely silt-free, very flavorful, very bold. This has to do with obviously the beans as well, and I'll link the video up here in terms of like my review of the beans if you want to check that out after this video. But yeah, so in conclusion, does James Hoffman, is his French press technique the ultimate technique? Yeah, I would say it's pretty ultimate. It's pretty fantastic. And it produces a lot less sludge and a lot less, well, completely no sludge and completely a lot less floaty bits than my regular technique. So I will be using his ultimate technique, and I now will phrase it, at least in my home anyway, as Joe's technique, but giving him some credit. So yeah, if you're on the fence about using his ultimate technique, yeah, absolutely do it. I highly recommend it. But thanks for watching all the way to the end. Again, I'm Joe with JoePicksJoe. If you like this, if you found it helpful, scroll down, hit subscribe, hit like. I really, really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.